When working with assemblies, your file folders can tend to get quite disorganized. I know mine often do. Within the large assembly folder, there's a folder called Organize. And you can see inside it has a couple folders inside, and otherwise all of the parts and sub-assemblies are strewn about within the folder. If you've ever tried to move these things around or organize these a little bit better, you may notice that SolidWorks loses the file references because it's no longer in that same folder. And we're going to look at that a little bit, as well as using the SolidWorks Explorer to manage replacing and finding your references. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new folder and call it Power Supply. So I have the power supply in here as a separate subassembly. So I want to select out the components within that subassembly. It's going to be these 5, as well as this AC connector. And this fan guard is used within that assembly as well, but I also use it in another assembly, so I'm going to leave that out of the folder. And I'll just drag that and drop it into power supply. From there, I'm going to drag in 4U storage server and open it up. And we'll take a look if it's able to find those references. So we can see if we look at the assembly, we're notably missing a power supply. And you can see on the left that this is in the suppressed state. If I right click and say unsuppress, it's going to ask me to locate the file. I could go in and find it myself, but in this case we'll take a look at the SolidWorks Explorer. And so I'll go ahead and open that up. And if you don't have PDMWorks installed, you're going to get this error message. You can go ahead and click OK to that. And before I dive into the SolidWorks Explorer, I just wanted to point out that if you right-click on any SolidWorks file, you can access a few of the SolidWorks Explorer options. And I'll talk about each one of these within the SolidWorks Explorer itself. So now I'm going to come into my folder. In this case, it's going to be 2012. And it'll be that large assembly folder. And I'll click on the 4U storage server. So before I go into the references, I just wanted to cover the interface of the SolidWorks Explorer. First, once you click on a file, you'll get info on that part. You can look at the properties. So if we had any custom properties added in, we could view those all in a list. This will show all the references. And you'll notice in red, the power supply shows file not found. We can look at where this is used, or where the 4U storage server is used. If we had various configurations, we could look at those as well. And any hyperlinks, and we can also view the component or assembly. So if you've used the SolidWorks Explorer before, it used to be a lot simpler. Now they've integrated the eDrawings interface, so we have a few more options that would be included in the eDrawings as well. But we can come in and get a quick view of the model. Can hide out various components and get a look inside this model without having to load it up within the SolidWorks interface. Now I'm going to go ahead and come back into the references, and I'll right click on the power supply, and we're just going to say replace. I'll go ahead and browse. And go into that power supply folder and click open. And I'm getting this error because I still have the files open. So I'll go ahead and exit out, click OK, and that'll bring those references back. Now if I go back into SolidWorks and open the server again, we can see that it picked that power supply back up. So there are a few other options aside from replace. We can do a pack and go right from the Explorer and save out the assembly. We can see within the power supply there's actually several file not found as we moved the power supply outside of those folders. And effectively what's happening with the power supply is that SolidWorks will look down folders. So if we move the power supply down a folder, it'll tend to look down and pick that up. Sometimes it won't be able to do that, but it won't be able to come back out and say that the fasteners are on the outside of that folder. So we'll have to link those references as well. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and create another folder and call it fasteners. And this will allow me to clean up this folder a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and drag all of these and drop them into fasteners. Now if I come in and click on the power supply and look at the references, I can replace these as well. And for all of my hardware, I should be able to just replace one, and then when I open it up in SolidWorks, it should pick up the rest. So let's go ahead and see if that works. So now I still have 3 missing. I'm going to go ahead and drag the power supply in and see if it picks up those other fasteners. So it actually picked up 2 of them and not another. And let me just take a quick look in the folder. It is sitting in the folder. Usually it'll pick this up, and the reason is because it sees one reference in that folder, it'll look for other references in that folder as well. If I go ahead and say unsuppress, okay, I did find the reference. It just didn't unsuppress the components. So from here, if you save, it'll now have those updated references. And if I come back out and go to the power supply again, we'll see we now have those references. Also, if you create a new folder and want to move a component into it, you can right click and say move and drop this into another folder. I tend to avoid that option because it's easier to drag in a large number of components, update a single reference, and allow SolidWorks to find the rest when you open up the assembly. There's also the option to replace a component if you have another component that you want to put in. And there are also several options at the top. We can refresh, save to a file. There's several options for the Explorer itself. And within the Explorer, you can also search out for components. But that's how you use the SolidWorks Explorer, and one way you can go about organizing your components.